Every year I make a new sewing goal. This year's goal was piping. This video is going to be a compilation of everything I learned from practicing and researching all the techniques with piping. The pattern I'm going to use to demonstrate that is going to be the Aelin from Stitchcraft. This is the bag I'm going to sew in the video. The fabric is from Jane R. Edwards. I'll have a link to both the pattern and where I got the fabric in this video in my description. If you are someone who makes your own sewing goals, please let me know. Drop it in a comment, or if there's something even that you want to work on next year to kind of get better at. I'm trying to decide what goal I want for next year, and I would love to be motivated or inspired for what I can choose for my sewing goal next year. So let's get started sewing this bag. There are not a lot of pieces to sew up this bag, which is one of the reasons why that I choose it time and time again. You can cut and sew and have an adorable, cute bag in hardly no time. The first thing we need to talk about are the pieces that's going to make the front and the back exterior. We're going to have two bottom pieces. I'm choosing to use cotton woven today, so I already have these interface with the SF101 equivalent, and that's like a medium weight interfacing. For the top pieces, I am going to do the same thing, a cotton woven with a medium weight interfacing like SF101 on the back. Then we have the two lining pieces. Since I already know how this bag is constructed, I went ahead and took both of these and added foam to the back. Since we're doing a bound bag, we're going to attach the exterior and the lining pieces wrong sides together, and that foam will be sandwiched in between. So that's all you need to create your front and back, interior, exterior. The next thing you'll have is your zipper gusset. So I'll have one piece of number 5 zipper tape. This is from Sew Majestic. I will have 2 exterior and 2 lining pieces for our zipper gusset. For the exterior pieces, I went ahead and attached foam. For the lining pieces, I am just using an SF101 equivalent. Then we'll have the bottom gusset. You'll need 2 pieces for that. Your exterior, which I went ahead and attached to foam, and the interior, which I'm just using that medium weight interfacing. This pattern calls for handles to be attached to the bag. I'm not doing that in this version simply because I didn't want anything to distract from the print on the exterior, and I think I'm keeping this bag for myself, kind of doing it the way I want. I actually do not plan on using this as a purse at all. I plan on using this as a pouch. I am going to go ahead and add D-rings to this just in case I change my mind, but I will put them in the gusset. And just so you know, it's not the best place to put D-rings for carrying this bag because they are kind of down low. It is best if you do the handles that she says in the pattern. Maybe I'll do another video and use vinyl and do the hidden connectors on this bag as well. So there are those. We have 2 zipper pulls. You can use one if you want. I have binding already cut out. This bag will be bound, so I have that ready to go. I'm also going to add piping. For this bag, I decided to make my own piping because I wanted a specific color to match it exactly. You can buy ready-made piping. I keep it always on hand too if I want something just quick and easy. But for this one, what I use is cording from Window Blinds. You can buy this in a huge spool on Amazon. It's super cheap, and it's a lot more economical to do it this way than if you go onto like a website and buy something specifically for piping. It's a little pricier. It doesn't give you a very thick binding, which is what I prefer, but you could buy thicker cording or piping or whatever on Amazon and it still not be like they sell cotton cording by these spools that's not made specifically for piping, and that will be more economical than buying something that's marketed as piping, unfortunately. So that's all the pieces we'll need. Bag comes together super quick. Let's go ahead and get started sewing it. So the first thing I'll do is I'm going to work on making that exterior front and back. It's so simple, of course. You just take one of your pieces for the top, you take one of your bottom pieces, you flip it up so that they're right sides together, matching against that long straight edge. And then you just sew this with the seam allowance given in the pattern. I'm going to make sure that I lock in my stitches both when I start and when I stop. Now that I have these 2 pieces sewn together, you're going to either choose, to me I think it kind of depends on where you want your top stitching to be. If you want your top stitching on the top, on the bottom, or if you want to butterfly your seams open and have it on both places. For me, I wanted to go ahead and do my top stitching on the bottom, so I'm just going to flip that seam down, and then I'll top stitch right on this blue section, the bottom. Now that I have that piece, I can go ahead and take one of my lining pieces and attach it wrong sides together. The pattern does have instructions on how to add car pockets to the interior and things like that. I don't want you to think that it's such a basic pattern. There's no extras given. There is. It's just I'm choosing to keep mine very simple because I'm not using it for anything other than a pouch. I'm not even going to use clips because that foam is kind of grabby and it holds onto it tight. And I'm going to lengthen my stitch length. I find that whenever I'm basting with foam, if I lengthen my stitch length to like almost a 5, then I have a better chance of it not kind of puckering or grabbing or something like that. So now I have front and lining attached. I will repeat those same steps off camera for the other one, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about the piping and adding that to this piece. I'm going to add the piping to the exterior, of course. I did cut my piping on the bias, but after you sew it, it kind of loses some of that stretch, but it's not a big deal. It'll go on there quickly and easily. Piping mainly is about your seam allowance, just the same as with binding. So the way you want to do it is you'll have a rounded, smooth edge, and then you'll have your raw edge. You will want to place this so that the raw edge matches the raw edge of your bag. I know it seems common sense, but if you're new to piping, you may not understand that, and you'd be like, I don't even know how to place it on there. The main thing I want to do is I want to make for sure that I'm going to get the proper seam allowance on my piping. I already know what I'm going to sew this bag with. I already know the seam allowance. So I want to make for sure that I cut my piping the right way, or if you're using prepared piping, that you place it the right way. What you want to do is you want to make for sure that when you sew it with the proper seam allowance, you're just going to be right under that row of the piping, the cording inside there. That's where you want your stitches to fall. So if, say, I was going to have a really large seam allowance, I would just measure and I would push my, say I was going to have a 1-inch seam allowance, I would just push this piping up to where it would be right there at 1 inch. The placement of the piping is going to matter as to where your seam allowance is going to be. Since I already knew what my seam allowance was, I measured my piping accordingly. I'm going to place it to where my raw edges match up exactly. And I'm just going to put a few clips in here just to show you, but you won't really even need to clip it. You're just going to go around. I am just going to use a basting stitch. So that means when I'm going around this, I'm just going to do 1/8 because I want to make sure that these pieces, whenever it's done sewing, won't be flopping up and trying to get in the way in that final sew. So I'll just do 1/8 of an inch all the way around. I will show you how to join these pieces once we get to that step sewing, so it's more me showing instead of just explaining. So now we're going to sew the piping on, and then we'll repeat all of that for the other panel, and that part will be done. So when I start my piping, I'm not going to start sewing right at the edge. I'm going to come in a little bit. I'm going to leave a little bit of overhang, and that'll just help me whenever we're joining the two pieces together. I'm going to go ahead and back stitch whenever I'm starting to lock in the stitches. It'll be lined up right there, and like I said, I'm going to use a basting stitch, so mine will be just 1/8 of an inch to secure those edges. And you can see there's quite a bit of gap there, but whenever I attach the gusset, that'll come in and do the full seam allowance and catch that. Now we're coming close to where we have that intersection. I'm still a little bit away. This part is unattached, if you remember. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sew right until they're very close, and then I'm going to make a cut, and I'll show you what I'll do next. So keep sewing. I'm going to go ahead and back stitch there so I can take this off and show you what it looks like. Usually I just do it while it's all under the needle, but I think it'll be easier for the video to do it this way. I'm going to cut a pretty long tail, but it's going to go right up to it and then a little past for us to fold it back. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of get the little cording I have in there out of the way. If you need to take out your stitches, that's completely fine. You're going to be folding this back anyway, so the stitches don't really matter at this point. And I want to pull out enough piping to where it'll match exactly with that other one, because we're going to butt those two pieces up together. So I just cut out the piping. I fold down this raw edge so it'll be a finished edge. And then I think I need to fold it down a little bit more. Mine's still a little too long. Yeah. So you can see how it's going to fold right there exactly with it. I'm going to put that piece of piping in. Open this up all the way. And you just push it inside there, and you wrap this other piece that's coming from this side, you wrap it all the way around. And it'll take just a second because I want to make sure it looks smooth. I don't want it to look very obvious. Let me clip that in place. And I'm going to stitch it, and then I'll hold it up so you can see that it does look like a really nice and neat fit there. I'll come back to my machine, start and stop back stitching both times. So you can see whenever I have that gusset attached, you're not even going to be able to see that little fold, that little overlap, and that's the way I do mine. It does take just a few minutes to finagle it, so I think it's a really good way to do it. Other techniques, there's other methods, but that's the one I use. So now that I have this panel complete, I'm going to set it aside. I'm going to work on my other one off camera, and then we're going to work on the zipper gusset, and we'll put it all together. Seriously, that simple. So now I have both of my fronts, backs, and exteriors and interiors completed. I'm going to set these pieces aside. We won't need them until after we're getting done with our zipper gusset, and that's what we're going to work on next. So I'm going to set the bottom pieces aside and just work with these top gusset pieces, the zipper gusset panels. This is a basic zipper gusset. We do them all the same way. We're going to put them together the same way. I'm not going to add my pulls on first. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set down a lining piece first. For me, that is the piece without the foam. I'm just going to set the zipper tape on it. I'm going to make sure that I have a little bit of zipper tape hanging off on both ends. No pulls attached. I'm going to match up that long edge, and I'm just going to sew with the seam allowance given the pattern all along that long edge. I'm going to make sure that I backstitch at the beginning and the end. For this one, I'm just doing a basting stitch, and then I'll come in with the exterior and do the full seam allowance. So there is a lining attached to one side. My print is directional, so I've kind of got to decide the way I want them to look. I think I want them to both be going facing that way. So if you're looking at the back of the bag, you see the correct print. If you're looking at the front of the bag, you see the correct. I think that's what I want with this one. So I'm going to put this one. This is the way I want it to look at the end. Like this. So when you orientate it that way, the next thing you do is you just flip it over. So they're right sides together with that zipper tape sandwiched in between. So basically everything is right sides together with your exterior. Make sure your short ends match up properly. When you put it under the needle, you'll take a few stitches forward, then go back to lock those stitches in, and then continue with the seam allowance given. So now that I have the lining and the exterior pieces sewn together with the zipper, I'm just going to pull them apart. For me, the best way I found to do this to get the best top stitching is I go ahead and baste these raw edges first, and then I will go down and top stitch. Both of these stitches will be 1/8 of an inch away. It's just one will be considered basting because it'll be temporary, won't seam at the end, and top stitching is one stitch that will be seen at the end. So I'm going to baste first, and then you'll see me top stitch. Okay, now I have that both basted at the bottom and top stitched in place. Everything looks great. I'm going to go ahead and repeat those same steps to complete this other side. So I'll put the exterior and the lining right sides together with the zipper tape sandwich in between, sew it, top stitch it, baste it. Once I get that done, I'm going to put my zipper pulls on here, and then we will come back for the next steps. So now I have the zipper gusset done. with the pulls on and the zipper tape trimmed. I'm just going to grab out those 2 D-ring connectors. Like I said, this isn't the pattern because it's not the best way to do it. You'll see whenever you get it all around there that they're very low, so it wouldn't be like the best way to carry a bag. But I don't plan on using this for a bag, so I'm okay. I am just centering my D-ring in the middle of this zipper tape. I'm going to leave some overhang because I don't like a really long D-ring connector. I'm just going to base that in place. Do the same thing for the other side. And then I'm going to pull out these bottom gusset pieces. Same way we do any gusset, we're going to take the exterior one, we're going to put it right sides down, matching up the short end with the exterior side of the zipper gusset. We'll take the lining piece and have it right sides together with the lining side of the zipper gusset piece. Again, short sides aligned. I am going to sew all of this together. You could sew it independently, but I really don't feel like it's necessary since it's just a short sew. You shouldn't have any trouble keeping all those layers together. So make sure that you sew this with the seam allowance given in the pattern because it will matter how your gusset will attach if you sew it with an inaccurate seam allowance at this point. Make sure your D-ring is up and out of the way and go slow when you go across there just so your needle does not hit that area. Come over to the other side, do the same thing. I'll have to kind of make a little bit of a bump in the middle so that I can get these to fit together. On this one where they're kind of going to be straining a little bit, you'll want to probably use some clips just so things don't shift while you're getting them under your needle. Again, make sure that D-ring is down. Back stitch on both stopping and starting, and sew with the seam allowance given the pattern. Watch your D-ring. Flip everything out. I'm not trimming down that D-ring. I'm leaving it long. I am going to pull these apart. I'll have to do some trimming. I always do. Most patterns have you get really close to the zipper tape. I always like to see a little bit more of my tape. I think it's pretty. I like the pop of color. So I always have a little bit I need to trim. I will trim that all off camera, but for right now, I'm just going to pull everything down and I'm going to top stitch from one side to the other on both of these seams. And then I'm also going to go around and baste all the long edges, the exterior and the lining together so it's all one even piece. So I have my gusset ready to go. Everything's trimmed and attached, one solid piece. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the centers of my gussets and the centers of my main panel pieces. For the gussets, I always just put those seams together, and then that's going to give me my center marks for the top and the bottom. I do not do the corner marks on this bag. It isn't a big bag, so I don't feel like it's necessary. I will just kind of check and make sure everything looks good when I'm putting it all together. But if you want the corner marks as a helper, definitely do that. No problems at all. Once we get these center marks on our exterior panels and our gusset panels, we just put everything together. That's how quick this pattern comes together. I adore it. It's one that I've sewn so many times. I actually was able to be on the testing team for this pattern, and I loved it from the first time I sewed it. I have made it with vinyl, I've made it with cork, I've made it with clear vinyl, definitely made it with cotton woven. So it's really just one of these patterns that can just look so many different ways depending on the materials you use. I'm actually going to get templates made from this pattern. I am going to get templates made as a personal set from Jolie Lee Creations. But the designer is talking to Leslie to maybe make this template set public on her website. If so, then you can get it there. Everything's made, quarter marks. Now what you do is you take, let's see, how do I want? I'm trying to think of which ones I want, which gusset. Okay, I want this one for my front. So what I'll do is I'll turn it inside out and I'll take my exterior top, match it with the exterior top here, And I put a few clips all around this section here before I move on. I know a lot of people don't like foam. You could use Decaville light or heavy or whatever you want. I like foam. I like a poofy, fluffy bag sometimes. So that's why I'm using that. But there's lots of times I've used other materials instead of foam. I don't even know if it calls for foam in the pattern. It might just call for Decaville light or heavy. Come down to the bottom and do the same thing. Start clipping right where those center marks meet. And then what I'll do is I'll just ease this around the rest of the way. This gusset always fits really well for me. I never have trouble with it. It's a very well written pattern and the measurements are perfect. After we get this all clipped, what I will do is I will look inside to make sure that I can see my piping, that the piping is not folded or bent or anything like that during this clipping process. Look how perfect that corner fits. Is that not just amazing? Love it. But I will just kind of peek and make sure everything looks good before I sew it. And then I will sew it with the seam allowance given the pattern, which will be, if I did math properly, will be right up against that piping, so it shows through just that little pop of color all around. You want to make sure when working with piping and a gusset that you get those edges flush, because if not, then all the work you did to make that piping math work out will be for nothing, because it won't fit and you'll have like disappearing piping, or the piping will be not the same width all the way around the bag. Does that make sense? Okay, when I look in, everything looks perfect. I love it. It looks great. So what I will do now is I'm going to sew. Let's see how I want to sew it. This is always tricky for me. I never know if I want to sew it like this or if I want to sew it like this. I think I'll push it down and sew it this way. I think that'll be the best bet. If I'm struggling at any point getting a perfect sew all around here, I'll grab my stiletto, I'll grab my hemostats, I'll do whatever it needs to do so there's no slipping of the gusset or the panel and everything stays connected, the raw edges together, because I already know it fits. It fits perfectly together. So if the slipping happens, I need to stop and fix it and not let it continue. So let's sew on this gusset, and I can't wait to see how it looks once I get it all sewn and attached. Okay, I finished up sewing that first side around. There were several times that I kind of got off on my seam allowance around the curve, so I'm going to pop this out and see what it looks like. If it looks okay, I'm good to go on, but if it's not tight enough or if I have any disappearing piping, I'll need to pick out those spots and redo it again. You can see my bottom curve is the place where I struggled the most. I see one trying to disappear in there, but overall, when I look at it, the piping looks really good, so I'm okay with that. Well, no, let me go around this side. See how that's kind of out too much? I need to go around this corner for sure. I think I might tighten up here a little more at the bottom as well. Other than that, I'm good. So let's tighten in this spot right here, and then we will call it good and start putting on the binding. Okay, let's see how that looks, and if I need to do it again, I will. Much better on the bottom and much better on the sides. Great, great, great. I'm okay with that. I feel like it looks good, so I'm ready to go on to the next part, which is binding this first side. Now, if you've watched my videos, you know I do a lot of videos on binding, so I don't go into all the details anymore because you've just seen me do it so many times. First thing I do is I just take and fold under that raw edge. We're going to place these right sides together. I'm going to start right down here at the bottom. Clip it in place. And then I'm just going to sew all around this with the seam allowance I just did. If you're nervous, really nervous, you could even go on the other side and kind of have your binding underneath and sew that way. I'm okay with just keeping that same seam allowance, so I'm okay with that. If I need to, I'll adjust it in the end. When I get to the end of my binding, what I'll do is I'll cut a piece a little bit longer than where the binding ends. That way I can fold that raw edge back just like I did to start. I want them to kind of be butted up against each other but not overlapping. And then I'll continue sewing, making sure I back stitch. I'm just checking to make sure I didn't lose any of my binding. Everything looks good. Maybe a small part is trying to get lost right here at the corner, but it's still enough to where I can see it. So now that I have the binding sewn on, I just flip it all over. Now that I have it flipped over, I'm just going to fold it and then pull it down to where that folded edge just meets those stitches that I made. So you can see it's just covering it. We want it to just meet. If we have it to where it just meets and it's not too little, too long, it's perfect. Then when we sew around with that same seam allowance given in the pattern that we've been sewing with, it's going to match perfectly on both sides, and we're going to have it looking as good as perfect as us humans can do. So that's what I'm going to attempt to do now, is I'm going to fold it to where that folded edge just covers the stitches I just made. After I clip and get this all folded, then I will sew again one more time with the same allowance given the pattern, the same one we've been using, to get this binding attached, and then that will be one side completed, and then we just do the exact same thing all on the other side, and we're done with the bag. So here's how everything looks clipped together. Binding looks great all around. And so now I'm going to sew with that same seam allowance, and then after I do that, I will sew the other side off camera. I won't come back on to show you those same steps, but they're the exact same steps. My binding is attached. It looks great. Everything's working out perfectly. I just have to repeat this all again for this other side. Now I'm going to do that off camera, and then I'll come back for the big reveal. Let's keep our fingers crossed that I don't mess up on that side, and then we will have our bag finished. So I have my bag finished. I attached the binding around both sides. This is the inside of the bag, and we're going to turn it around and look at everything on the outside. Look at this, how perfect it is. I love the structure. I love how it's very firm. I did want to use foam on this one. You wouldn't have to. But this shape is adorable. Everything looks amazing. I love it. You can see what I was talking about by how low these D-ring connectors are. If it's against your body, it'd be stable. But you can see how that's kind of a little too low for these D-ring connectors. The actual handles for this bag are actually up here, and so you can just kind of carry it like that. I just didn't want that where I wanted this for me. It is going to be an adorable pouch. I'm keeping this one. I'm so in love with this print. The print is from J&R Edwards. The zipper tape is from So Majestic. The pattern is the Aelin. This is from Stitchcraft. It is amazing, well-written pattern, and you can see, I got a string there. You can see the shape, everything comes together perfectly. I think I'll do another one of these, like I said, in vinyl. I really want to show you the hidden connectors on that one. And it's just a great pattern. It comes together super quick. I hope you guys try this one out. If you do, definitely post it in her Facebook group. And I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you so much for watching another tutorial of mine. I appreciate it, and I hope to see you soon.